Respectfully, it's rhetoric like the left's calls to limit free speech under the guise of fighting misinformation, funding wars, the sterilization and exploitation of children, teens, pandering to bureaucratic elites, and ongoing efforts to disregard the Second Amendment as if it wasn't intentionally included in the Constitution to protect our freedoms and guard against the tyranny that pushes me away from the left and towards the right. Dog, you just said a bunch of hysterical right-wing things and then said it's actually all of those like things that I have hallucinated the left is doing that has forced me to be right-wing. Just have some fucking backbone, dingus. I stand loudly and proudly with my political fucking opinions. Why the fuck can't you? Why do right-wingers always have this like shame, you know? Investigate that a little bit. Maybe scratch the surface. Interrogate it a little bit. Why do you feel a sense of shame that you can't just be like, I'm right-wing. I'm just fucking right-wing. Old liberals used to be against shit like this. Do you want me to dissect everything that you said? I can do it quickly. Okay, the left's calls to limit free speech. There's never been a moment in this country where the left actually had free speech. Free speech has only been presented as a dynamic where right-wingers all the way to fucking the Klan and Nazis and neo-Nazis can take advantage of that. Left-wingers have never actually had free speech. There are 32 states in this country where being pro-Palestine is literally illegal. You have to sign something in the state of Texas, for example, supposedly one of these big old hoorah free speech states where you have to literally sign a form to say you will never protest Israel, you will never boycott Israel, you will never engage in any actions in any peaceful demonstrations against the state of Israel. Does that sound like free speech to you? No, because you don't know anything. That's number one. Okay? It's illegal to be a communist. Taft-Hartley, we were talking about that recently, where having an ideological interest in communism meant that you could never actually be a fucking union leader. Does that seem like free speech to you? Does that seem like it's violating the First Amendment? It absolutely is, but it doesn't matter. Number two, you said sterilization and exploitation of children. I suspect you're hallucinating a world in which like the left is doing like gender. They're doing gender. They're doing woke to the children. Maybe I missed these. Where does it say that in all the law? I think you miss a lot. Google 32 states BDS to find out more. I love that like it is my job to look at this fucking gish gallop of misinformation and dissect it piece by piece. And this motherfucker doesn't have the decency to just Google something. At least do the fucking fact checking in real time so that you can either A, come to the conclusion that I'm actually objectively correct, which I am, or B, come out with a fucking counter that is reasonable, that you summarize as quickly as possible from said Googling expedition, that we can have a normal conversation. If you don't have this information, and I do, at least listen to what I have to say instead of being like, well, I might have missed this. Okay, be a little bit more open-minded, please. Okay, in terms of exploitation and sterilization of children, being pro-trans, none of those things. It's actually, in my opinion, causes way more harm to trans kids. Okay, just like it did to gay kids when being gay was also considered in the same negative connotations as being trans, to not be able to come out and express your gender identity or your sexuality freely. Pandering to bureaucratic elites is correct. The Democrats are doing that. Don't know why you think the left is doing that. That's ridiculous. I don't think the left is inside of the scope of the Democratic Party. Nor do the Democrats give a shit about the left. As a matter of fact, this entire conversation with the Kamala Harris, my Kamala Harris criticisms actually greatly will summarize my position on how the Democrats do not give a shit about the left, or the bureaucratic elites do not actually give a fuck about the left at all. That's just a word salad moment from you. And ongoing efforts to disregard the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is just a piece of paper. You are a fucking delusional idiot if you think that the gun violence in this country that seemingly is infinitely higher than every other fucking OECD nation is not directly a consequence of our false interpretation of the Second Amendment, which is a relatively new interpretation of the Second Amendment, directly corresponding to gun manufacturers' material interests in readily selling to a market readily available weapons. Okay, that's it. The Second Amendment interpretation that you take for granted now is completely new. It's a new interpretation of the Second Amendment. Gun control is an absolute necessity. Many countries that have more guns, okay, than other comparable OECD nations have significantly less gun violence. Why? It's because they have gun control, reasonable gun control, gun safety measures, okay? You should not be able to walk into a Walmart and be able to purchase a weapon. When you do that in a country where there are more guns than there are people in circulation, you end up with mass shootings every weekend. You end up with shootings all the goddamn time. And then we turn around and we increasingly try to find different reasons as to why it's happening. We say mental health. Other countries have comparable mental health problems. Most countries have comparable mental health problems, yet none of the gun violence. I guess the only factor that is different there is the readily available arsenal that is in circulation amongst the public. As if it is intentional, if it wasn't intentionally included in the Constitution to protect against our freedoms and guard against tyranny, I have not seen anyone fucking rise up in arms for anything other than their jalapeno poppers being under threat during the COVID lockdowns. There is mass tyranny and a direct violation of our freedoms happening on a daily basis, especially since the post 9/11 universe, where America greatly increased its surveillance state apparatus. You are constantly on guard. You are constantly being surveilled. Police can do whatever the fuck they want to you. They just haven't because you're probably somewhat privileged enough to avoid said police scrutiny and police violence, and therefore think it will never happen to you. One day it will happen to you, but it doesn't really matter because it'll be far too late. Also, once again, the idea that we are going to fight against tyranny when tyranny is already happening on a regular basis with weapons is also silly when you consider the fact that a drone can just fucking laser you from hundreds of feet away, and your AR-15 is not going to be able to fight against that. Okay, this guy, they who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. That's really funny and cool, but you're already existing in peaceful slavery and you haven't participated in the dangerous freedom at all. So shut the fuck up. You are a docile little imp, okay? That's it. You're a servile dog that thinks that he is going to bark when the time comes. The time is here. You've done nothing about it. Your life fucking sucks. You have no goddamn health care. We're giving permanent trillions of dollars to the fucking state of Israel so they can keep killing bees, okay, at a time when half the country is underwater, the other half of the country is on fire, and yet we can't even seem to harden our infrastructure. The only infrastructure hardening that's happening is to try and kill a bunch of the people that are coming over the southern border while we lie about them being rapists and drug dealers and mass murderers, even though they are responsible for a much smaller percentage of the crime per capita than American citizens are. You have been brainwashed into hating your neighbor, hating people that speak differently than you, because it would be far too scary for the powers that be if you actually recognized who is owning you, who is dominating every aspect of your life. But you've done nothing about that. So make no mistake, it's not the left that is harming you, okay? And you most likely are a right-winger already, but you're too embarrassed to be a right-winger and openly come out with that. So you say, oh, I'm an old school liberal. I've heard this a million times over. Dave Rubin used to say that all the time. A classical liberal, right? Back in the 2016 Gamergate era, all these other fucking former Democrats, former progressives would say, we're the real progressives. The progressives have become regressives. Anyway, have fun though. Love you, man. Appreciate you being real. Just don't see the same way as you. I know there are plenty of things that you don't see the same way. I didn't actually give you anything that was like biased in reality. I just told you what is going on. Do you have health care? Do you have free government sponsored health care? Do you have a ladder up your current class position? Do you have a meaningful way to improve your life? No. Do you feel like you're going to be able to fucking retire at a reasonable age, in the same age that your parents might have retired? Do you have a pension? Fuck no. And if you do, it's probably because of your labor union, but that's besides the point. You don't have free college. You don't have free education. Nobody's fixing the goddamn potholes. All of the fucking taxes that you pay for go to the police directly. And then, nothing really happens. Nothing really changes. Nothing actually makes your life better. And you get more and more angry. And in that anger, you find yourself in the throes of right-wing sentiment because they at least say, hey, you're right to be angry. You know why you should be angry? Brown people, black people, trans people. Those are the reasons why you should be angry. Yeah, we're just hardening Israel's infrastructure and killing there. Hell yeah. At least they get to have health care though, because we got their defense covered,